are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of Locked On Eagles, a YouTube exclusive. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Wanted to get into today an interesting topic with Eagles training camp right around the corner. Actually, literally just right around the corner, 2 days away from the start of Eagles camp at the NovaCare Complex right next to Lincoln Financial Field. Cannot wait to get things going for such a highly anticipated 2022 season. When you look at this Eagles roster on paper, the moves they made this offseason, the progress they made in year one under head coach Nick Sirianni, a new era of Eagles football, making the playoffs, going 7-2 down the stretch, then again making all those upgrades in the offseason. There's a reason so many Eagles fans, media members, and the entire NFL, when it comes to fans and media alike, are high on this football team. The expectations are there, and I truly believe that they are justified. And as you all know, that comes with an added amount of pressure when there are set expectations. Look at the 2011 Dream Team. Look at the 2015 newly revised team under Chip Kelly. Look at the post-Super Bowl team of 2018, the revamped offense around Carson Wentz in 2019. There have been a lot of Eagles teams that have come into the season with these kind of expectations, with a lot of pressure. Some have swam, some have sunk. A lot of it comes down to what the quarterback does, right? This offense, this defense vastly improved across the roster. Football is a team sport in its purest definition, but the most important position in football is really going to determine how far you can go. As we say on this show a lot of the time, you have an F1, a Formula F1 speed car, right? It can get to a certain miles per hour. It has a certain ceiling of potential, this car, but somebody does have to drive that car. And for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is the quarterback driving this car. We know the kind of pressure he is under this year, not only to make sure this roster reaches those heights that it is capable of, but also he himself is heading into a make or break season. The Eagles next year have 2 first-round picks in a 2023 NFL draft class that is loaded with quarterback talent. We know the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in 2020, not to be the starting quarterback, but to be the high-end quality backup to Carson Wentz. We know last year they started him. They hoped that he would become the franchise quarterback, but they did feel around, try to move up for Zach Wilson in the 2021 NFL draft. We know this year they inquired about potentially trading for Russell Wilson, for Deshaun Watson. The 2-star quarterbacks would not waive their no-trade clause for Philadelphia. So although Philly, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, Jeffrey Lurie, they have all publicly backed Hurts. They have built around him in 2022. They believe in him and want him to be the franchise quarterback. We all know, though, they aren't all in. They aren't completely sold that next year, when he's potentially up for a new contract, he's got one more year after 2022, but the Eagles and the entire NFL, they like to get quarterback deals done early as it eventually becomes more team-friendly. The more these quarterback deals happen, again, just the higher the price goes. He needs to show this team that they can start thinking about a contract. They can put those draft picks away when it comes to potentially looking at quarterbacks and instead decide to build around Jalen. That is a ton of pressure on Hurts' shoulders, not to mention just overall being a quarterback in Philadelphia. It is maybe the hardest city to play this position. We've seen that. Just ask Donovan McNabb. Just ask Carson Wentz. We know across the board how difficult it can be. So much riding on Jalen Hurts starting on Tuesday when training camp gets underway. And I started to think about it. Like, as I mentioned, the 2011 team, 2015, 2018, 2019. There's been a lot of high pressure situations with set expectations for Eagles rosters and the quarterback in general. So I decided today, what if I ranked since 2010, after the post-Donovan McNabb era, where no quarterback really had long-term security outside of Carson Wentz for a few years, and each year it was kind of prove you're the guy. What were the most high-pressure situations? Is the 2022 Jalen Hurts season the most high-pressured situation for a quarterback for the Eagles since 2010. I ranked the 7 most high-pressure situations for a quarterback heading into a season, and we are going to start with number 1, and I truly do think that is Jalen Hurts for the 2022 season. When you look at, again, the opportunity that he has, but also the opportunity that the Eagles have next year. Again, they're going to need to decide if he's worth a new contract. They're going to need to decide if they need to really start diving in on 2023 prospects in a strong class. Hurts has to prove that he can take this roster to a certain ceiling, to be a championship, not just because 2021 Jalen Hurts, if you take that guy, he doesn't improve or regress, and you put him on this roster, this Eagles team's going to be better than a year ago. They're going to make the playoffs like last year. They could even win a playoff game. I could see them having a Tennessee Titans 2019 like run to a conference championship, or the San Francisco 49ers last year, where you're winning with your quarterback, but you're not winning because of him. But if he doesn't take this team to a new level when it comes to the passing game, especially now that you've added A.J. Brown, you have DeVonta Smith, you have Dallas Goedert, both coming into incredible seasons when it comes to the opportunity they have to show their stars at this level, he's got to show they can pass to a championship level of football, or the Eagles are going to take advantage of the opportunity they have next year in that draft class. It's make or break time, simply put, for Jalen Hurts. Like, he cannot, there's no more middling. He cannot have an okay season, good, not great, and expect to get a contract extension and have Philadelphia not consider for the 3rd offseason in a row potentially finding an upgrade. So I truly believe, just because of his overall job security, I think 2022 Jalen Hurts is at the most risk to lose his job compared to these other quarterbacks that I'm going to rank. So I think 2022 Jalen Hurts is coming in with the most pressure on his shoulders of any Eagles quarterback since 2010 in the post-Donovan McNabb era. Number 2, I really do think, is Carson Wentz in 2019. When you think about, and not because of job security like Jalen Hurts this year, because the Eagles had just given Wentz a historic contract. He was making the most money in the NFL, right? It was brand new as he headed into that season. He was the long-term guy. They chose Wentz over Nick Foles. They let Foles go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They chose their guy. It was Carson. So he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, but Wentz was coming off 2 years in a row where he suffered a season-ending injury, and Nick Foles took his team on a deep run to the playoffs. He won them a championship in 2017, and then he nearly got them back to the NFC title in 2018. So Carson Wentz headed in a city that loved Nick Foles. I mean, there's a statue outside of the stadium, right? He was coming into a situation where his backup had just taken his team on back-to-back deep playoff runs, one of which resulted in a championship. And Wentz himself had no playoff experience, and they weren't sure if he was going to be able to stay healthy. I mean, a torn ACL in 2017, a fractured back in 2018. Again, it's hard enough to play in Philadelphia with the expectations, especially in a championship window. He's got to prove that he can do exactly what Foles did in back-to-back seasons. And although Wentz himself went on his own playoff run in 2019, won 4 straight games at the end of the season to win the NFC East, we showed what that pressure over the course of 2017, 2018, 2019, and then eventually in 2020 did to Carson. Eventually, it took its toll. The pressure built up year after year after year. Perhaps impossible expectations to meet for Wentz eventually broke the camel's back. And we know that Jalen Hurts, the pick, is kind of what really did it in. But it was just each year, the buildup of this pressure. And Wentz heading into 2019, that was the moment because, again, it was back-to-back playoff runs that he missed, that his backup took his team on a magical run. Not to mention how improved that offense was. Howie Roseman was all in on Carson Wentz in 2019, right? Trading for Deshaun Jackson, drafting Miles Sanders in the 2nd round, drafting Andre Dillard in the 1st round, giving him that historic contract. You got that. You got the city being like, we got rid of Nick Foles for you, man. It's time for you to do what he just did in back-to-back years. He's got a statue out here. We know the chemistry he has with this team. What about you? That is, I'm telling you what, any human being, that's a lot to overcome. So I think 2019 Carson Wentz had the second most pressure of an Eagles quarterback, I would say, since Donovan McNabb left after the 2009 season. So I would say number one is 2022 Jalen Hurts. Number two is 2019 Carson Wentz. And then honestly, I think number three is 2018 Carson Wentz. I mean, when you think about it, yeah, again, Carson Wentz wasn't going anywhere, but he was just coming off a torn ACL, and Nick Foles had just went on one of the best playoff runs in NFL history, beating the number one defense, blowing them out in the NFC Championship game, and then beating the greatest quarterback ever in a Super Bowl, where that greatest quarterback ever threw for over 500 yards. So again, the pressure didn't come from job security potentially. We knew Foles was the backup and he was going to be the backup for one more year. But the pressure again came from expectations to replicate not only what Foles did in 2017, but what Carson did. Carson, for 13 weeks of the season, was the best player in the NFL. He was the favorite to win NFL MVP. So he had to pick back up where he left off the year before and emulate what he did at an elite level for 13 weeks and what his backup did that eventually led to a championship. Not to mention, he wasn't fully healthy. He was recovering from a torn ACL and an LCL. So to have to do exactly what you did and what Foles did the following year, coming off that serious of an injury, especially when you were a mobile quarterback like Wentz that made his money off of off-script plays, making plays with his legs deep down the field, that is a ton of pressure to overcome. Expectations from himself, from fans, from the media, and even if it wasn't said directly to him, from the organization. Again, there was a statue outside placed of his backup. Imagine you're at a job where you're on paid sick leave, right? And you come back and the guy that replaced you is the king of the company. And he's got a statue right where you have to work. I mean, just imagine that kind of pressure. And we saw what happened with Wentz in 2018. He was good, but he wasn't great. The team struggled. They were 6-7 when he got hurt, and he felt so much pressure that his back literally broke. He suffered a fractured back in that season where he was trying to play through an injury all year because, again, of what he had to prove to this team, to himself, and to the city of Philadelphia. So again, it makes sense why Carson Wentz in 2020 became the person that he was, because the pressure built up from 2018 and 2019 is just maybe insurmountable. I mean, it's absolutely incredible what some of these Eagles quarterbacks have had to go through. And number four is Jalen Hurts again. Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz have dealt with a lot of pressure over the last 4 seasons since Super Bowl 52. 2021 Jalen Hurts is fourth on my list because he entered again the season as a starting quarterback coming off of a year where the franchise in Philadelphia had one of their worst and darkest years in organizational history. The team only won 4 games. They had just lost their Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson, who was fired. The team's 5-year franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz collapsed during the regular season. The Eagles did not plan for this to happen. They did not plan for Doug Peterson to be fired. They did not, although maybe they did. They didn't plan, though, for Carson Wentz to regress at a historic rate the way he did that season. So when you look at what happened that forced Wentz to be traded to the Colts, Jalen Hurts came in. I mean, maybe it doesn't seem like a lot of expectations because many people didn't think he'd end up becoming the franchise quarterback anyway. They didn't think the Eagles were supposed to be good in 2021. But many saw the selection of Hurts, including myself, as what finally did Carson Wentz in. So when you look at that kind of pressure for Hurts to show that he could not only be a positive for this team, but he could be the franchise quarterback that perhaps his presence cost this team in Carson. You head into that, and also the rumors about the Eagles potentially trying to move up. We know they really liked BYU quarterback Zach Wilson until they learned that Joe Douglas, Howie Roseman's former right-hand man, was going to take Wilson with the 2nd overall pick. They were sniffing around that. So again, the team proceeded to move down and collect a first-round pick in 2022, just like they did this year for 2023. So the writing was on the wall there. Like, yes, you're going to get your shot, but you're a 2nd-round pick that wasn't supposed to be the starter. You were supposed to be the backup for 4 years. You're going to get your shot, but the Eagles are preparing to move on. They collected a 2nd first-round pick next year to use maybe on a quarterback. They tried to trade up for Zach Wilson. So Jalen Hurts, it felt like last year was going to be the only chance he got. Now we know he's going to get 2022 as well, but he's not going to get more than these 2 opportunities. Like, he was never, and maybe still isn't, the plan A for their long-term future. That's a lot of pressure for Jalen to show that he's the guy when the team maybe, and the majority of fans and media members, weren't really betting on you to be that guy. So overall, 2020 Jalen Hurts, or I should say 2021 Jalen Hurts, 2022 Jalen Hurts, 2018 and 2019 Carson Wentz, those 2 guys in those 4 seasons, the most pressure I think an Eagles quarterback has faced since 2010. And then wrapping up this list with my bottom 3, it's some quarterbacks from a while back. I would say number 5 on this list is Michael Vick from 2012. Not Michael Vick, the quarterback of the dream team, Philadelphia Eagles, but the if you redeem team. So when you look at Michael Vick heading into that year, the Eagles in 2011, outside of the Green Bay Packers, were seen as Super Bowl favorites with the moves to get Nnamdi Asomugha, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Cullen Jenkins, Jason Babin, Ronnie Brown, even Steve Smith. The other Steve Smith was on that team. The Eagles were coming off a year where Michael Vick was an MVP finalist, comeback player of the year. They were supposed to be a championship contender. They went 8-8. They didn't make the playoffs. Michael Vick missed a lot of games with injuries. He was inconsistent when he was on the field. They headed into 2012, make or break time. Not only make or break time for that entire dream team experiment, but for Andy Reid as a head coach. For the first time in his entire career with the Eagles, Reid was on the hot seat. So Michael Vick himself, on an interview with NFL Network, labeled that 2012 team as the redeem team. So they had to not only make the playoffs and redeem what happened in 2011, but they had to be a championship contender. And we know now nothing was redeemed. They went 4-12 after starting. Weirdly enough, that team started the year 3-1, but we saw all the turnovers that Vick had. I mean, he threw 4 interceptions that first game alone in Cleveland. Remember that overtime game when they played rookie Brandon Weeden? There was like, I think 9 or 10 turnovers combined between Vick and Weeden. It was a disaster. They started 3-1, but we knew it wasn't for long. Jason Peters was lost. Demetrius Bell was the left tackle. A ton of pressure for Michael Vick to try to elevate that roster and be what they were supposed to be in 2011. Not to mention, more pressure was built because in 2011, they ended the season hot. So they won 4 straight games. Jeffrey Lurie saw that and was like, they almost made it. All right, let's give Andy Reid and this dream team experiment one more shot. We know Michael Vick owed his entire second life in the NFL to Andy Reid for signing him in 2009 after he came out of jail. We knew how much it meant to Vick to try to save Reid's career in Philadelphia. We know it didn't happen now, but that's a lot of pressure that he put on himself. The roster had overall to elevate what was supposed to be a championship contender coming off such a disappointing season. That was a lot for MV7. And of course, we know now that it got even worse in 4-12 territory for that roster. 2 more here, 2 more high pressure situations for the Eagles since 2010. On my list is Mr. Sammy Sleeves himself, Sam Bradford. Headed into the 2015 season, the Eagles had traded not only Nick Foles, who we now know went on to win a Super Bowl for the Eagles, but also a second-round pick for Sam Bradford. I'll never forget that report from Albert Breer when he was on NFL Network. We thought the Eagles had not only traded Foles for Bradford, but they had flipped first-round picks. So the Eagles were now inside the top 15. They could try to move up with Bradford and the picks to go get Marcus Mariota. So for a while that offseason, which added pressure on Bradford's shoulders, we thought he was simply a trade chip for Chip Kelly to go get his real guy, which was Oregon quarterback Marcus Mariota. So there was the pressure on his shoulders of not being Mariota. And then when they found out they couldn't trade up for Marcus in that 2015 NFL draft, the Eagles fans, media, and Chip Kelly themselves were all pretty disappointed that it wasn't Mariota. I think a lot of people, including myself, were convinced they were going to find a way to pull that off. So Bradford had the pressure of not being Mariota, being a guy that the Eagles traded away a starter in Nick Foles that the 2 years before was 14-4 as a starting quarterback for the Eagles. He had a 14-4 record, 10 games over 500, and they dealt an extra second-round pick to get him. Not to mention the pressure of all the injuries Bradford had suffered the previous 3-4 seasons. This was a first overall pick, a Heisman winner that was seen as a bust, that was seen as so disappointing. And it wasn't really because of what he did on the field. It was the fact that he wasn't available on the field. So the injury pressure, the pressure from the whole Mariota saga, and the fact that the Eagles traded another quarterback that was 10 games over 500 and an additional pick to get you, not to mention all of the new pieces on that roster that Bradford had to make work. It was a ton of pressure, and Bradford just simply wasn't close to good enough to carry that football team. So Bradford shows up at number 6 on this list. And then wrapping up my top 7, it's back in 2010. It's Kevin Cobb. Kevin Cobb entered the taking over for the greatest quarterback, the most accomplished quarterback in Eagles history, Donovan McNabb. Right? So that's huge shoes to fill. Donovan McNabb took this team to 5 NFC championship games, a Super Bowl. 2 years before Kevin Cobb replaced him in the 2010 season, McNabb and the Eagles were leading the Arizona Cardinals with 6 minutes left in the NFC title, nearly knocking on the door for a second Super Bowl appearance in the McNabb-Andy Reid era. That was just 2 years before Cobb took over. The year before Cobb took over, the Eagles were 11-5. McNabb had made the Pro Bowl, and they made the playoffs once again. We know they got blown out in Dallas that first round. It led to the Eagles trading McNabb to Washington. They thought he was on the downturn of his career. They were right. They saw how he regressed in Washington and in Minnesota. But Kevin Cobb had to take over. That's some of the most pressure simply in sports, is when you're the replacement for the greatest player at the most important position in franchise history. So that's a ton of pressure. Not to mention that Eagles roster was super talented, so he couldn't hold back Deshaun Jackson, Jerry Maclin, LaShawn McCoy, Brent Selleck, a great offensive line, and Michael Vick was right behind him. And yeah, Michael Vick was a third-string quarterback the year before, coming out of prison, but Michael Vick was a former MVP, one of the greatest players in the NFL for 7 to 8 years, and that was your backup. So the leash was tight. Kevin Cobb in 2010, a ton of pressure on his shoulders. It's crazy when you look at that list. So many Eagles quarterbacks have come into a season with a lot to deal with to prove that they're the guy in a city where it's hard enough to play this position. But those are my top 7 quarterbacks in the Eagles' last decade of history that faced a ton of pressure heading into the season. Jalen Hurts faces a ton of it as training camp starts this Tuesday. We got you covered Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and right here on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe and check out Locked On Eagles, your only daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Monday through Friday. And follow us on Twitter at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase LOE. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.